Thank you for being here. My name is Mohammed Najibuddin. I'm the Regional Coordinator for Science and Policy at the United Nations Environment Program, Regional Office for West Asia. I will be your moderator for the session today. We have three esteemed speakers with us that I will gladly introduce. Professor Nikos Nikiforakis, who is a global network professor at New York University and director of the Center for Behavioral Institutional Design at New York University in Abu Dhabi. An internationally recognized behavioral economist, his research on social norms and policy design have informed government strategies in Abu Dhabi and Australia, and he serves on the technical advisory board of the UAE's Behavioral Science Group. Professor, thank you for being with us today. Ms. Emma Banks leads Hilton's food and beverage strategy across Europe, the Middle East, and Africa from the company's regional office located here in Dubai. Since joining in 2019, she has advanced sustainability and responsible business initiatives, earning multiple regional awards, including Sustainability Professional of the Year at Gulf Food 2023, and recognition as one of the most influential women in hospitality. Ms. Banks, thanks for being with us today. Last but not least, Mr. Tariq Al-Khouri is UNEP's Regional Coordinator for Climate Action in West Asia, with over 15 years of experience advancing climate policy and sustainable development. He leads regional work on mitigation, adaptation, and carbon markets, advises government on Paris Agreement implementation and NDC financing, and previously directed UNEP's regional initiatives on circular economy, sustainable consumption, and green growth. Again, Tariq, thank you very much for being with us today. Our session today will explore how behavioral insight can drive change at every level, from personal choices to institutional practices. So we will look at how behavioral change can actually help reduce food waste, how it can incentivize people to reduce the overconsumption of single-use plastics, and how both can actually positively impact climate change. So without further ado, I would like to turn my first question to Professor. From a behavioral science perspective, Professor, why is it that even when people understand the risk of their actions, they often struggle to change their behavior? What actually motivates people and institutions to act differently? Thank you.
That's a great question. We have been developing techniques to understand deeply what motivates humans for the past 30 years. And overall, you can say there's a mix of psychological, social, and institutional causes for the way we act. And overall, you could condense the influence of these factors on three or two even things. Our preferences as individuals for doing one thing over another, and our expectations, our beliefs about how others will behave. So when we're talking about, why I may not do what I'm told is right, the kind of two categories we can distinguish. On the one hand, you have private risks. An old example would be smoking. People were told, smoking is bad, but people did not stop. There are different explanations. On the one hand, you can have something like people want to postpone unpleasant actions until tomorrow, reaping the benefits today, a kind of procrastination effect. Then there are other people who are saying, well, actually, that's not the case. It's rational to continue smoking until a later age, which already brings, to the forefront the issue of correctly diagnosing the causes of the problem from the set of possibilities. And the way you framed, of course, the discussion here today, we're mostly interested in social risks. Why do we keep, wasting food when we know it's not good? Or why do we keep not recycling when we know that's good? And again, there are different reasons. But here, one thing which is really important is the social values and the social pressure that we have. So for example, take an example in the UAE, and I don't want to get into Emma's water, but we were just in Abu Dhabi yesterday in a government roundtable discussing food waste. And there is an issue with values that in the UAE, if I have people in my house or in my wedding, it is generous to put a lot out there. It's actually looked down upon. So there is a social pressure. So if we want to have change there, typically what you need to do is to define the alternative outcome that you want, make it change the values of the people, and ultimately coordinate people's expectations. The last part is really important. So one reason we don't change is because we think others won't change. So we need to have a common understanding that, throwing away food is not generous, it's actually bad. We need to reframe the conversation.
Thank you very much. When I think about behavioral change, sometimes I think that governments or NGOs are trying to do everything in their power to actually give the incentive for people or even for institutions to change their behavior. Now, one of those tools that those entities are using is nudges. So why do you think sometimes that nudges do not or fail to actually make people change their behavior?
So, for those of you who may have heard the term nudges but may not be fully aware what it is, a nudge is an intervention which is supposed to be very mild to preserve all options available for an individual. So, for example, if I give you a reminder, that's a nudge. To go back to your dentist, you have an appointment tomorrow, something like this. Now, the reason nudges sometimes fail is for the same reason that sometimes taking paracetamol fails. Each of these things is basically a treatment meant to address a specific problem, a social problem. But if you go to the doctor and they prescribe something without having done the proper tests, you may be getting a medicine that would work in different conditions, but it doesn't work in every condition. Nudges are great because they're kind of relatively low cost and they're not unpopular with citizens. At the same time, they cannot be used as panacea and crowd out other remedies. So, for example, some of the more complex social problems, we know in advance we cannot nudge the problem away, and we need to give, if we have something akin to a social cancer, then you need to do chemotherapy. You don't need to give homeopathic treatment, if you know what I mean.
Yes, no, of course I know what you mean. So in your opinion, do you think that we can regulate nudges?
To regulate nudges, well, I would say part of what my center is what we're doing is we're trying to raise awareness about the need to diagnose the causes of a problem. I mean, we have the methodologies. Now, government and policy often wants to move very, very fast, and they cannot afford, to wait for a meaningful, deep answer. But sometimes, for important issues, we need to take steps so we can identify exactly what's causing the problem. So sometimes we need to give nudges, sometimes we need to give something a little bit stronger.
Great, thank you very much, Professor. I think this is a very good segue to ask Ms. Banks about her previous experience with dealing with food waste. So, Ms. Banks, from your experience, what interventions, whether community-based, technological, or policy-driven, have proven most effective in changing how people and institutions handle food? And how can we make these practices part of everyday culture rather than being it temporary campaigns?
Thank you very much. That's a long question and quite a long answer, but I'll tackle it and break it down. So, the first thing is we know from UNIP that their Food Waste Index report from 2024, I'm sure everybody here is aware, but just in case, we are wasting a day 1 billion meals. Okay, 1 billion meals a day worldwide approximately is going in the bin or to landfill. All the while, 700 million people are starving or undernourished. So that, you know, if there's a why, that potentially is it before you even get into the effect on climate. So much like Professor Nikos said here, the challenges around social norms and what is acceptable. And, you know, you were talking how you were at the UAE, you were at the Abu Dhabi government yesterday around a panel and a discussion about hospitality, and in the Arab world, generosity and abundance, and showering your guests with generosity in terms of food and water and hospitality in the home. Is the social norm. And, you know, I work for Hilton, and we are naturally hospitable by nature. You know, we work in the hospitality trade. And so for us as a business, you know, hospitality is rooted in our business DNA and indeed our culture, and certainly operating hotels in regions where the culture is all around hospitality, abundance and generosity. So these are well-intentioned and cultural, but perhaps not helpful social norms that we need to address now. So at Hilton, we're obviously laser focused on giving our guests a great experience, and indeed, you know, we want to provide our guests the world's best stay. But at the same time, through our Travel with Purpose, which is our sustainability policy and agenda, we are committed to reducing our environmental footprint, like every responsible business. And as a purpose-led organisation and culture-led organisation, we know not only our guests are looking for us to operate these ways, but indeed our team members. So under our Travel with Purpose strategy, we have clear goals around reducing food waste. And every kitchen is mandated. It is what we call a brand standard. It is a requirement for every hotel in our managed and franchise portfolio to have a food waste reduction policy and structure and processes in our kitchen. And the hotels are audited against that. Okay, so it's a very, very clear mandate within our guidance and our SOPs. However, more than policies and a big stick, it's around as a purpose organisation, and it's about training our team members and working with our guests around the why reducing food waste is so important. And naturally, we have more control over our team members' behaviours and our chef behaviours. And I'll touch on that a little bit, and I'll also touch on behavioural nudges to follow on from Professor and how we've been successful in the hospitality environment with that. But linking back to our work with UNEP, so over the last 3 years, we have been working with UNEP under the Recipe of Change campaign. Many of you may have heard about the United Nations. And basically, we have been working with UNEP to try and create a lasting roadmap to creating a blueprint for reduction of food waste in the hospitality landscape. And I know a lot of you are probably sitting there going, is she all right? Because I've been to, I've been to the iftar buffets, I've been to the suhoor buffets, I've been to breakfast, I've been to brunch, and these are the unhelpful social norms in architecture and hospitality that myself and my team are trying to break. So the first thing we did is we basically went on a program, and I'll touch a little bit on Green Ramadan and Green Breakfast, but basically we looked at ways of understanding the problem. So the first thing you have to do, we know that you can only really take informed actions once you've got data and insights. So we have two ways of measuring food waste in our business. First of all, we are mandated to record all our waste in all forms on our award-winning platform, Lightstay. And our Lightstay results are actually open to the public, and all our guests that stay in our hotels can see our results around reduction of waste, all be that energy, food, water, carbon waste in our hotels. But also, we, to your point on technology, in over 200 of our hotels, we've adopted what's called Winnow AI technology. And basically, that's a variety of different systems. Imagine it as an industrial weighing scale in the kitchen. And you can either have a basic one that just weighs the food, photographs and weighs the food, or there's more advanced ones that photographs multiple mixed food as it's been thrown in the food waste bin. And indeed, we also are now working with Winnow on how we can look at use AI technology to look at production, planning and forecasting. So just in terms of Green Ramadan and Green Breakfast, so basically what we did is we put a toolkit together. We put in infrastructure and processes in our kitchens around making people responsible for all the production, pre and post food waste, recording, using the data and insights. We gave accountability to all the team members, be it front of house, back of house. They were required to come on regular calls, work with Winnow, use the data and insights to drive a reduction. And, I'm not going to talk about the results, but let's just say the first pilot in Green Ramadan 23, we did it 24, 25, and it's grown from 3 hotels in 3 GCC countries to 41 hotels in 14 countries. And each year we are reducing a 50% reduction on the base of food waste during Ramadan. We also did Green Breakfast, where we went to COP28 with United Nations and our friends at NAMA and talked about our results from Green Breakfast, where we reduced in the UAE food waste in our breakfast operations by over 50%. So we get the data and insights, and based on those data and insights, we then take actions with our team members around cooking more a la menu, how we present on the buffet, how we even slice and dice the fruit, how we pre-portion, how we, do less mise en place and less cook a la minute. So we took a series of actions. And for example, at Ramadan, we found out that 74% of our food waste was coming from bread and pastry. So instead of just piling it high on the buffet, we actually just put out Arabic bread, and then we put messaging for our guests that if they wanted a wider selection of bread, it would be served tableside. That was 74% of our buffet waste. So once you get the data and insights, the chefs can start to take action. So finally, just in terms of nudges and interventions, under the Recipe of Change campaign with UNEP, just lecturing our team members and indeed lecturing our guests in the hospitality environment when they want to enjoy. And we know that generosity and abundance is so important culturally. It's around inspiration. So we used the Recipe of Change Ramadan nudges. So for example, talking to our guests and having signage on our buffet around, halve the food waste, double the blessings. And we trained our team members into talking to our guests about why we were supporting the Green Ramadan campaign and how, using, please come back to the buffet. There'll be plenty more later, and just starting to make these changes. So we used subtle behavioural interventions. But I'm also a firm believer that in the end of the day, social media, B2C rather than B2C. Your team members, your customers are where we're going to make the biggest impact. And I really, really do believe that pop culture and social media and awareness will help us in this challenge. So we partnered again with Chef Leila Fatala, who is the food waste chef advocate for UNEP West Asia. She has over 5 million followers on a variety of her platforms, be it TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook. And she is a trained at-home cook, and her impact over supporting us on Green Ramadan and Green Breakfast, and actually getting into pop culture, getting into popular culture and spreading the message. So I think it's a combination of business taking responsibility, investing in processes, infrastructure, having public KPIs, being very clear with your team members, putting in place behavioural nudges and interventions, and sharing with your guests why, and also supporting campaigns such as UNEP and working within popular culture. I hope that explains kind of what we've been doing.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for this comprehensive response. I think, what I understand, it all comes down to mindset, to system change, to the way we value resources and design our daily routine.
Yeah. I think one thing that we also try to use with our team members, and also if you can get it across to your guests through communication or social media. And when we were working on Green Breakfast, which was basically a 13-week program from measuring base food waste in our 13 hotels in the UAE in our managed portfolio, and within 13 weeks reducing our breakfast buffet waste, and going to COP28 to talk about it. And by the way, all our food waste data was open API'd to the UAE government through Winnow. There was no manual transfer, so the results were completely transparent from the Winnow system, from our kitchens, open API straight into NAMA, the UAE government food loss and waste prevention body. And our friends at NAMA told us that during Ramadan in the UAE, and equivalences are very helpful when we're talking about the almost unquantifiable, food waste in Ramadan in the UAE alone could, if all piled up end to end, could be the same in volume, space, as 9.5 Burj Khalifas. Imagine that. Imagine food waste being 9.5 Burj Khalifas. That's the challenge that we're facing.
Thank you. Thank you again.
Thank you.
I wanted to also talk about another aspect that is heavily impacted by behavior, is the overconsumption of single-use plastics. I'm not saying by any stretch of the imagination that plastic is an enemy. Plastic pollution is actually a very big problem. And according to UNEP, 2/3 of all plastic waste come from single-use and short-lived plastic products. And of the total of 7 billion tons of plastic waste generated globally to date, only less than 10% was recycled. So this actually brings us to another problem, because the mismanagement of plastic waste is not only bad for aquatic life, but it's also bad for human because of the microplastics that are actually ingested by animals and then ingested by humans. So I want to just give you a couple of examples of how behavioral change can actually affect change. And I'd like to start with the institutional side. And when I talk about institutional side is about how when you make changes on the upstream can have a lot of impact on the downstream. Just to give you a very small example, in August 2023, Coca-Cola Canada decided to change their bottle, the Sprite bottle, from green to clear PET. PET is the type of plastic used to design the plastic bottle. So they went from green to clear. The pigmented plastic, when it's recycled, it's only recycled into green pellets. So you can only make green product and not clear product. So if you design your product in a universal material, then you can use it to you can recycle it and then produce much more product than only green product. So that change on the upstream side had a lot of impact on the downstream. Another example that's also, I think, very important is the black pigmented plastic. So if you go to a store and you want to buy a rotisserie chicken, usually that rotisserie chicken is put into a black box. And when we did a research to understand why is it put in a black container, a plastic container, black, and not white or brown, is because of it was a marketing scheme. So because you don't want the customers to see oil at the bottom of the tray, so it's more appealing to buy it. But pigmented plastic, black plastic, you cannot. The infrared machine at the recycling facility cannot read the black pigment, so it's not going to get recycled. Now, is the technology there? Yes, but it's extremely expensive to actually recycle black pigmented plastic. So one small change they did is they changed the color of that tray from black to brown, which, I mean, it's not white, because white, it's still, you can still see the oil, but at least it's a middle ground solution, and you can actually recycle that product. So that's another change, a behavioral change that happened. I'm also going to give you a last example before I turn it to Mr. El Khouri. One of the things that I worked on in the past is to increase the recycling of plastic bottles in Canada. And one of the things that we wanted to understand is why consumer decide to throw the bottle in a garbage bin rather than in a recycling bin. Because if the municipality is giving you the option to throw your bottle into a recycling bin, which will get recycled, why you as a customer, you're actually putting it in the garbage bin, which at the end gets landfilled and not recycled? So why are you making that decision? So what we understood is, in some of the communities that live in Canada, some of them, they did not understand the message that was communicated by the government. So one solution that we did is we had nudges campaign, and we had messages translated into 5 or 6 languages, depending on the community that lives in that particular area. And that had a tremendous impact, a positive impact on increasing the recycling of plastic bottles. So what I'm trying to say is behavioral change is extremely important and can have a lot of impact both on the consumer side and also on the institutional side. Mr. Tariq, as you know, whether it's food waste or single-use plastic, both have an impact on climate, right? So everything at the end have an impact on climate. So from your perspective, how does individual and institutional behavioral feed into climate action? Can behavioral shift really make a measurable difference toward national or global climate targets?
Okay, thank you, Muhammad. It's very difficult to speak after this great speakers, especially after the great example we heard from Emma and after the insight from Professor Nikos and also after yourself. But then I can take 2 steps back and talk about the climate perspective and behavioral change. Now, as we speak now, countries are meeting in Belém, Brazil, to conclude COP30. It's in 2 or 3 days it will be concluded. And I have to say we are not doing great. I don't like to be a little bit pessimistic, but if the audience knows about Paris Agreement, we almost lost Paris Agreement. Paris Agreement talks about limiting global warming to 1.5 to 2 degrees. We lost the 1.5. Now we are at the stage of 1.5 degree. It's there and it's not going anywhere. So all this, I will call it pessimistic introduction to touch on your questions. So basically, when we talk about climate change original problem is the greenhouse gas emissions that is emitted in the atmosphere, that is troubling the gas balances in the atmosphere, therefore causing global warming, causing climate change, and we are seeing the climate change and all of that. So who's emitting the greenhouse gas emissions? It's people. It's human activities. It's not government, because government is people. So government institution can work on policies, strategies, etc. But if there is no change in behavior, nothing will work. Even if you do, and Professor Nikos know more than me, even if you enforce it, even if you do strict law on food waste, for instance, if there is no behavioral change from inside, nothing will happen. So there is a lot of numbers that can confirm this, and Emma was perfect in mentioning those numbers. If we tackle food waste, food waste, I cannot add more than what Emma said because it was a great input. But what I can say is why we should work on food waste, for instance, and because the food that until it comes to your table, it takes enormous amount of energy, whether from production to transportation to cooling. The one apple that you see and you might throw because it's bad, you cannot imagine how much energy it took, therefore contributed to climate change. it's not even here. Even when you waste this food, it goes to the landfill, and organic waste emit huge amount of methane gas, which is more harmful than the CO2 36 times even. So behavior of human matters, because again, when we are talking about climate change or any other environmental challenge, it comes from the people, from the human, from the human activities. We talked about food waste, but there are many other sectors. I can give example to for instance, our clothes and the production of our clothes took a huge amount of water and fresh water to be produced. One T-shirt can take 2,000 or 270 liter of water to be produced. So that is a huge number. So individual behavior and action matter, whether from reducing food waste, whether from watching what clothes we buy, how sustainable are we, and most importantly, how we are dealing with energy, because energy, it's 90% of the problem. Energy emits 90% of the CO2, and the CO2 is 70% of the problem of the greenhouse gas emission. So we at the United Nations always like to give boring numbers, but that's why we partner with great institutions such as Hilton, because they know how to communicate better than us, and they are the one who is dealing with people more than us. We deal mostly with government, we will focus on strategies and policies, and every part of the process is important, but now we reach a point that strategies are not enough, policies are not enough, laws are not enough. If there is no change in behavior, we are going into climate hell, and sorry for using this word. So I think Professor Nikos knows more than me that even if you enforce a law or a behavior, I think if there is nothing inside, you cannot make a difference. And then I can spend hours telling you why it's important, because the science is there, because the numbers are there. We talked about food waste, about energy consumption, about clothes, but what you have to think about water consumption. You have to think about everything, even transportation. Transportation alone is responsible of 14% of the greenhouse gas emission. And if individual, for instance, decide, let's say 20% of the individual decide to start to do public transportation and carpooling, we are reducing 3 to 4% of the global greenhouse gas emissions. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Tariq. I think Professor has an intervention. Go ahead, Professor.
Not a behavioral intervention, a kind of a conversational intervention to what Tariq said. I completely agree. And an example that's close to home about regulation failing, I'm from Greece originally, is the introduction of smoking bans in interior spaces. And these things were introduced around the same time throughout Europe. And in some countries, they work marvelously, like in Germany, for example. And in some other countries, obviously Greece, but also Austria, they failed. And the reason obviously has to do with cultural differences. What exactly are these differences? So I keep hearing, I was around when behavioral insights units started coming around the world, and now I think OECD counts that there's about 300 supporting governments around the world, and also private companies. And what I'm noticing is there is a change. Now we're talking about behavioral change, behavioral interventions, nudges. These are the buzzwords of today, and tomorrow they will be gone unless we actually are careful with a promise of this kind of behavioral revolution that started in 2008, to be honest. We're asking ourselves the same questions we've been asking for at least 30 years. We know there are issues with the environment. We know humans are doing a lot of wrong things in terms of the environment. Why haven't we solved these problems? The reason is because we have not tried hard enough to look at individual behavior and address it. So obviously a lot of people are doing a lot of research, but there needs to be a little bit coordination on the research front to look deeper into individuals. We do have methodologies now that can really be used to target individual consumers or citizens, whatever you want, in a way that you talked about some influencer. I don't do social media, I don't, for better or for worse. That's part of the solution, targeting the right people at the right sequence. But how do we know? Do we go about randomly? Or do we actually use insights that science offers us? Because when we're talking about, environmental, global warming effectively, this is as serious as it comes. And we only get one shot. So why, the Paris Agreement, which was such a hope for the planet. And, we know that one of the fundamental reasons there was this normative conflict between different countries that we actually know how to address from a scientific point of view. So if we combine scientific research, which is actually easier to do these days, if we can combine it with policymaking, AI, big data, all these things can provide a lot of insights at a much faster speed than ever before. So if we can really lean on research, we can help make a better world, because science is there to improve the world, is not there to make a profit. So that is my hope, that we can work together to use the insights from science with all the great work that people are doing to actually get the answers to these fantastic questions we've been asking for a long time.
Can I just make one point on that? Because it's a great segue to one point in that I didn't make that I think lends very well to what Professor Nikos was saying there. So we talked about how we worked under the unit recipe of change, and we used variety of nudges, and I think some of the Ramadan blessing nudges, and I talked about, halve the food waste, double the blessings. It's about really having respectful nudges, and we can't lecture our guests who are coming to our hotels for a family or occasion or celebration. But because we have, over the 3 years of Green Ramadan, been, so fundamentally successful in showing, if Hilton Riyadh, that is serving every night 2,000, covers 2,000 guests at an iftar buffet, and can get their pre and post, that's production in the kitchen, buffet waste and plate waste, because we measure plate waste as well. So we measure what the guests are throwing away on their plate, so we can drive the right behavioural nudges. If we can get that sort of waste in that buffet environment to 15 grams per customer from over 150 at the start, you can do it. It's hard work. There's a lot of process, a lot of cultural change. But on the point of nudges and behavioural interventions, because our results, and it has been really hard work, Green Ramadan and Green Breakfast, but we've shown what we can do in that environment. The Stanford Graduate Business School has reached out to my team, and we are working with the behavioural insights, and we're working with some graduates who are looking at all the messaging and nudging we used. And we have got 6 pilot hotels where at breakfast we are using agreed but slightly differentiated language and nudges. And we are gathering some data for the university, and there's a lot of super clever, bright people. I mean, I'm a glorified waitress, so there's a lot of clever people who are taking the data, looking at our results, and hopefully are going to allow us to make an informed decision as to, and in my region alone, I mean, I think we serve something like I can't remember the result, but I mean, we serve millions and millions and millions of guests at breakfast. Okay, in the UAE, I think in that period up to COP28, 13 weeks, it was 2 million. So if we can work with the researchers to then advise us on which is the most effective language to drive behaviours to reduce food waste and still have a great time, that is much better than going with the marketeers and saying, hey, what works for the brand and put on our buffet around, please be mindful of what you put on your plate or something. So we are now working with behavioural insight specialists in our environment to hopefully help us share the right nudges with our guests, but still be hospitable and respectful, but actually continue, because as Professor said, unless we follow through and these behavioural nudges and actions actually work, it'll just be another thing that goes by the wayside. So I just wanted to share that example of what we're doing now to try and refine it and, use data and insights to make the right decisions, to do the right thing, to reduce our food waste, but also help our guests. And what we believe in is we want our guests to make almost what we call, sustainable choices by default. Smaller plates, the way we portion, the way we serve them, more aluminium, more live stations, less piling high, behavioural nudges, help the guests make default sustainable. So the guests almost is making it without even having to make much effort. And in my frictionless effort and is the epitome of hospitality. So if we can allow our guests to have a great time, reduce their carbon footprint and still enjoy, but reduce food waste, I mean, that is a win for hospitality, I believe. And that's what we're working towards.
That's great, Emma. I have a question for you, actually, before I try to go back to an intervention to a professor. When we say that it's actually time to deliver on something or to take action, do you think that? So most of hotels, they have buffet, right? And
if you're at the London Metropole at 9 o'clock on a Sunday, and you've got over 1,000 bedrooms, and everybody wants to have breakfast between 9 and 10, and you've got two people, it's a necessity in some in some environments.
Yes. So, do you think that charging people for not for overeating, but let's say for leftovers? So let's say they have their plate, and they've ate once and twice. And then the waiter comes on the table and see a pile of food that is left on the table.
No, that's never ever. That's not going. I mean, guests have already paid. Especially if they've paid for bed and breakfast. And we're all about hospitality, and we know all our research shows that breakfast is incredibly important for our guest experience and guest satisfaction scores. So what we believe in is our guests, and all the research shows that our guests are more interested in supporting purpose-led organisations that are transparently, through data and insights, showing their guests that they are making sustainable choices, policies and procedures to support the environment. And I think starting to charge guests is not hospitable. They've already paid for it. I think it's about nudges and supporting our guests to make sustainable choices. But at the end of the day, it's about education, it's about the why, and it's about helping our guests to graciously and effortlessly be more sustainable and reduce food waste. I think, starting to charge for food waste. I think, the fact that our guests, with our, we publish, our research all shows our plate waste, and, the fact that we educate our team members to talk about it, and even people don't believe it, but, we have the data that shows that if you actually use smaller plates, it does help, and portion control. And, one thing that the dreaded pandemic did for the buffet environment was, because of hygiene reasons, we went a lot more to individual portioning to allow buffets to be more hygienic as we came out of COVID regulations. And actually, that was a great thing, because we've kept that practice of more smaller individual portions. So I guess 10, and even as small as things as, how we cut a cake, the bread loaf cakes at breakfast. We used to just slice it that way. But the data and insights showed us how many grams was being wasted. So we now quarter it, and most guests then just take a quarter rather than a half and leave it. We even know that if we bake our croissants to be 11 grams smaller when we weigh them at production, we will waste more because we actually got the data of how many grams of a croissant a guest would eat. Now imagine if every hotel bakery in the world knew the right grams to make that croissant and reduced, ends or the croissant being thrown. Never mind the energy in the croissant, the yeast and the biodiversity loss in growing the wheat and the flour, etc. So it's monumental, the impact we can make. And, in hospitality hotels, we can make impact at scale.
Thanks a lot, Emma. I don't think I have time to ask my question. We only have 4 minutes left. I just wanted to give the opportunity to the people in the room to ask questions. Please go ahead.
Hi, myself Tasmia. I'm a digital wellness coach and an optometrist. I would like to ask this question. What strategies actually work when it comes to changing long-standing unhealthy habits or behaviors in children and young teenagers? How can parents and individuals make these changes stick? Could you share proven insights or techniques that help sustain and enforce behavior change effectively?
Should I turn this question to you, Professor?
I mean, you can. Let's see if I can answer that. It's a great question. I'm a father of 4, and that's. Look, the honest truth is, this is the answer depends really at the particular problem at hand, the particular location. In general, if you're interested in young people, what you see is as they grow up, they start taking their parents down from the podium, the divine podium that they know everything, and they start replacing them with little deities called friends. Nowadays, an additional issue, of course, is we have things like generative AI, and they ask and they get information from wherever. So, but the peer effect is really, really important. And this is really unique. In the UAE, where our schools are so multicultural, they're so hard to predict, and we really don't have data. So we really need to understand these trends case by case, unfortunately. But the main actors are parents, friends, and whatever media feed they get. So if I want to solve a problem with my children, I need to understand what's happening with their friends, who the main actors are. That's an unfortunate answer. So there is no silver bullet for this kind of issues. But if we look carefully at the problem, there's always a solution that can be found.
Thank you, Professor. We still have 1 minute 35 seconds if anyone has any questions. No? And 1? And 2? Okay, well,
Do you want me to just, since you have, so going back to combine the two issues, in the UAE, there was a real concern about the healthy habits or not of the children. And, the government introduced a fabulous program that, with small adjustments from place to place, that has had a profound impact on the eating habits of children at schools, which then led an effect, as much as we know right now, to their habits outside school. So this shows you the importance of attacking problems where they're most prevalent, and then they create habits. So here's a case where, kids go, they've been taught by their parents to eat in a particular way, lots of ketchup, lots of chocolate, whatever. They go to school, they're told a few things, and then they go back home and they say, that's not good, Daddy. No ketchup for you. And then we have social change. So a lot of these social problems, if we talk to children, maybe we do have a better tomorrow.
We also found that with our team members. A lot of team members told us that they took the knowledge around food waste and what we were doing in our restaurants and our kitchens, and they said they were taking it back to all the different countries that our team members originate from around the world here, and they were taking it back to their families and educating their families, which is exactly what we want, and naturally we've got a very young demographic of team members in our restaurants and kitchens, so it's not just about what they're doing at work, but how a lot of them shared that they took it home and were, chastising their parents and their family and their elders around waste and food waste. So that's exactly, what I think we should aim for, as well as Professor Nikos, to take it into the home.
Thank you. Yes, we do have another question. Yes, go ahead.
Hi, first, I don't have a question, but I want to add that last year I presented poster in the Dubai International Food Safety Conference about integrating peer learning and positive peer pressure to reduce food waste and reduce food waste in schools, and luckily it won first place. So yeah, people are aware that behaviors change when you start from the roots, the children, the next generations. So yeah.
Congratulations on first prize. Well done.
Bravo.
Well, thank you very much for the panelists. It was a privilege to be the moderator for today's session and to be with insightful people like you. And thank you for the audience. If there's no more questions, I think we're done. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mohammed.
Thank you. Thank you.